In Unit 8, we discuss the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. So before we have discussed all these cases under the Fourth Amendment, we know under the Fourth Amendment we discussed the protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. And under this Fifth Amendment, we're going to discuss the issues related to this privilege against self-incrimination. The first case we have is this Brown versus Mississippi. This case was decided in 1936, and then in this case, the defendants were suspected of murder, and then the police actually used this torture to get this confession, and then the issue was whether this confession could be used as evidence against the defendants or not. Of course, in the case, the Supreme Court excluded the confession, but it is very important for us to know the confession was excluded under the 14th Amendment due process clause. So we need to know in this case decided in 1936, even though the court excluded this coerced confession, the confession was not excluded under the Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination. It was excluded on the basis of this 14th Amendment due process clause. The court did not start to rely on this Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination to exclude confessions until 1966. So in 1966, the court decided this Miranda versus Arizona. And then in this case, the court also excluded the confession, but this exclusion was based on the Fifth Amendment protection against this self-incrimination. Actually, what happened in Miranda versus Arizona was not that complicated. The defendant was arrested for this sexual assault, and then the police actually did not really torture the defendant in any way. It was different from what we have in this Brown versus Mississippi. In that case, the police actually physically tortured the defendants, but in Miranda versus Arizona, there was no police physical torture was involved. And then the defendant actually confessed to his crime, and then he was convicted, and of course, and then he appealed his case to the U.S. Supreme Court. The defendant simply claimed before police interrogated him, the police did not tell him he had the right to remain silent, he had the right to counsel. So based on that ground, and then the defendant claimed his constitutional rights were violated. And then the court actually kind of agreed with the defendant. The court said, indeed, because the police did not issue the warnings to the defendant, and then this confession could not be used. So the confession, because the court said that was to use the confession in that fashion would be in violation of the Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination. So it is very important for us to remember before this Miranda versus Arizona, the court relied mainly on this 14th Amendment due process clause to determine whether a confession could be used or not. But after this Miranda versus Arizona decided in 1966, the court began to rely on this Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination to determine whether a confession could be used or not. It is important for us to understand in this Miranda versus Arizona, the court actually set up this Miranda procedural protection, meaning is before police custodial interrogation, warnings must be issued. And then the warnings, that is what we call the Miranda warning, and then we'll know what we have in this Miranda warning. That is the police must inform the person, you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to counsel. Anything you say to us will be used as evidence against you in the court of law. And after you know your right, whether you want to talk to us or not. And then, of course, the defendant can decide he would exercise his right, and then he would demand to have a lawyer. He would indicate to the police he wants to remain silent. And if that is the case, police cannot continue this interrogation. Of course, the defendant could also decide he wants to waive his right and he wants to talk to the police. But under this Miranda procedural protection, before police interrogation, before police custodial interrogation, the police must first issue this Miranda warning. Otherwise, the confession obtained could not be used. So that's why we say that is a procedural protection. This Miranda warning is a procedure. Police must follow through this procedure. If they failed to follow this procedure, and then the confession could not be used, regardless whether the police used physical torture or not. So in that sense, we say this Miranda warning is a procedural protection. Why the court would set up this procedural protection? The reason for creating this Miranda warning is this. The court said this custodial investigation is inherently coercive. Meaning is when a person is brought into police custody and then the police would interrogate the person, the court said that atmosphere at this custodial interrogation is inherently coercive. When a suspect is surrounded by the police officers, and then the police officer would ask the person whether he committed a crime, and then that atmosphere, the court said, is inherently coercive to make a person actually the person, even though the person maybe wants to exercise his right, not to implicate himself, maybe he would be intimidated and then he would confess. So in that sense, the court said if a person made a statement because of this coercive atmosphere at this custodial interrogation, that would be in violation. That would not be inconsistent. That would not be consistent with this protection against self-incrimination. Because why the defendant would make this, why the suspect would make this confession, because he is intimidated by this atmosphere in this custodial interrogation. So that would be in violation of this privilege against self-incrimination. So that is the reason why the court created this Miranda procedural protection. The court said because this custodial interrogation is inherently coercive, we should inform the person that he has the right to remain silent, he has the right to counsel, and then after giving this warning, and then if the suspect is still waiting to have this conversation with the police or to make a statement, and then the court said maybe after person actually already knows and he does not need to talk to the police, and then if the person still wants to talk to the police, and then we can be sure this statement would be voluntary, would not be coerced in any way. So that is the reason why this Miranda procedural protection is created. It is important for us to know several points because this Miranda procedural protection is created to overcome this inherent coerciveness of this custodial interrogation. We need to know it is not police must issue these Miranda warnings in all circumstances. Actually, to issue the Miranda warnings, we need to satisfy two requirements. One is the person must be in custody. The second one is there must be a police interrogation. So if either one of these two requirements, these two conditions is missing, and then the police are not required to issue the Miranda warning. It is very important for us to remember this point. For the police to issue the Miranda warning, the person must be in custody, and also there must be police interrogation. If a police simply arrested the person, the police do not need to issue the Miranda warning. If after the person is arrested, the person would want to make a statement to the police can actually take the statement. Why that is the case? Because there is no police interrogation. Even though the person is arrested, the police did not interrogate the person. So if the person would want to make a statement, and then the person could do that. So if there is only in custody, no interrogation, there is no need for the police to issue the Miranda warning. Similarly, if the person is not arrested, if the person is not in police custody, if a police just ask the person some questions and just to get information, do you know anything about this crime? And if the person would say he actually was involved in a crime, and then the police could also take that statement, and also there was no need to issue this Miranda warning because the person was not in police custody. So that's why we say we need to have these two conditions to be there at the same time. The person must be in custody, and also there must also be police interrogation. Only when these two conditions are satisfied, and then we say the police must issue the Miranda warning. It is important for us to take note of this. If the police issued the Miranda warning, and if the suspect indicated he wants to exercise his rights, and then the police questioning must stop. This is a very important point for us to remember, because later on we are going to see cases, and that would come to this point. The police need to issue the Miranda warning if there is going to be a custodial interrogation. And after the Miranda warning is issued, if the suspect indicates, I want to exercise my right to remain silent, or if I want to exercise my right to counsel, the police questioning must stop. The police cannot really continue to question the suspect. If the police would do it, that would be in violation of this procedural protection, and then whatever the confession police obtained would not be admissible. So this point is very important. It is also very important for us to know the court actually created several exceptions to this Miranda warning. This public safety exception is one of them. In this New York case, and then the police received this information about this person's involvement in a sexual assault, and then the police actually cornered the defendant in a supermarket, and then the defendant was carrying a gun. So the police actually arrested the person, the defendant, and then the police, without issuing the warning, the police asked the defendant, where is the gun? And then the the defendant indicated where the gun was, and then the police actually retrieved the gun, and then the police came back, and then the police issued the Miranda warning. So the issue was whether this police failure to issue the Miranda warning was in violation of the defendant's right. The Supreme Court said it was not in violation of the defendant's constitutional right because there was this incident occurred in a public place, and then if the gun was not secured in a timely fashion, that could harm the public safety. So whenever there is a public safety involved, the police could interrogate the suspect without first issuing the Miranda warning.